Well, what do you want your story to be about tonight?
A train that always wanted to be a zombie, and the train turned into a zombie one day.
Huh. Okay. This was the story of Henry the Train. Henry the Train was very, very old. And he had been running for a long, long time. Henry was a coal-powered train. A steam locomotive was what drove Henry up at front. Old technology. There were lots of better trains. There were diesel trains, and there were even electric trains. But Henry remained unchanged over the years. He had seen lots of changes. When Henry was young, railroads were smaller, shorter, not smaller. Distances were not as long, and sometimes hills were not that steep, mostly because most trains were made out of, we were powered by steam, and that wasn't powerful enough to go up a hill too much. So Henry had seen lots of changes everywhere in the type of load that he was carrying, in how people dressed, in how cities were growing up around him. And he always wanted to join another form of life. Let's say that Henry wanted to be a zombie. But in the world of trains, zombie means that it's connected to all the other trains. And so all the trains can share the same consciousness. And Henry was isolated. Um, so one day he devised a plan to become a zombie. He would make the brakes fail so that he could crash head on with something not too hard, only enough to damage its locomotive, and so that the humans would replace the locomotive. And if Henry was lucky, they would put an electric one, because electricity travels through wires that connect all the trains through the same magnetic fields, so they can think like zombies. And so he tried it, but it was a dangerous plan. What if he killed its human that was driving it? He didn't want to kill the human. Uh, this human had been with her for many, many years and loved her very much, and she understood that it was going to break her heart, the human's heart, that Henry had to destroy the locomotive, but he didn't want to kill the human at the same time. And so he devised a plan to first start shaking its tail so that a weird sound would come from behind. And so, as the train was riding down the hill, not the hills, but the plains, on a long, long trip, carrying perhaps coal or some other mineral, um, Henry started shaking its caboose, which is the back side of the train, and making a lot of noise. Pom, 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 pom. The metal was shaking and clanking everywhere. And so, at the time, the conductor went back to check what was going on with the noise. And when the conductor went back, Henry let go of the brakes and started accelerating. But it was a train, it accelerates really slow. And so the conductor didn't notice it at first, and he was going everywhere checking what was going on with the caboose, when suddenly he realized it was just too late. The train was going way too fast, and he was going to crash against another train that was waiting in a station ahead of them. And so the conductor tried to go as fast as possible in the front of the train, but he couldn't do it in time. And so when he saw that he was about to crash with another train, he threw himself to the floor, and Henry crashed and broke his locomotive. Well, Henry went to sleep because they couldn't find a locomotive for Henry, so they put him in a hangar, and Henry was sleeping and sleeping and sleeping and dreaming about mountains and other things and people. When one day, many years later, somewhere in another country needed carts to put him on the back of a train, of a locomotive, and they bought Henry at an auction, real cheap, and they gave him a new coat of paint. They made him super pretty, and one day, poof, they hooked him up to a locomotive. And guess what?
What?
It was electric. So Henry woke up and suddenly he was connected to the hive of all trains through things like computers. Well, not computers, because back then there were not computers, but electricity and electromagnetism. And Henry was fascinated with all the new knowledge that he was acquiring. He had become the zombie train he always wanted. The end.